course, we are back for another episode of Hard Not Life, dedicated to the new core of hip-hop today, the business, the brand, and the balance between authenticity and entertainment. Of course, we are recording in one of the most authentic spots in New York City.
Authentic.
For Aesthetic, home of Classic Material New York, on Grand Street in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Shout out to the OG Carlos for allowing us to be here today.
What?
Hard Not Life breaks down the deals and the real, the bars and the beef.
Yep.
Hard Not Life connects echoes of the past with news of the present, with predictions of the future. Anything we bring up here is up for discussion and debate. And that's what matters here. We are a gang that cares so much about this culture. I think we should introduce ourselves. I'm Saul Goodman, the Lion of Bed-Stuy, your host and your moderator. But my co-host like to introduce himself.
I'm THECAINMARKO, New Jersey's juggernaut.
You're...
Yo, if you find one of my old copies of Invincible in your girl's house, just mail it back to me, man. I'll give you my P.O. box.
All right. Cool. All right. That's your PSA. Okay.
Word.
The most talented man in New York City is, well, New York, the world. He's back with us after taking a few, the world, you heard me, nigga. I ain't stutter this time. But he's back after traveling around the world, doing simply dope shit. My homeboy Modern Marvel was good. So we're going to get right into it. A great man, unfortunately, passed away this year on November 12th. Shout out to one of my personal heroes. I'm sure THECAINMARKO can also attest to how important Stan Lee was in his life.
And according to Dallas Penn, he's triple OG status. He passed away. Triple OG Stan Lee. What you know about that?
I don't know if Triple OG is enough, man. He's been changing worlds since before my grandparents were born.
Literally changing worlds. Literally. I will say my man was out here in his 90s, still being in movies, still making them nice cameos.
I heard that, he got sick like last year in 2017, and like Marvel thinking far ahead and understanding that, death is a part of life, had him film a whole bunch of cameo scenes in different outfits in different scenarios just so they can have enough content to include him well after he unfortunately had to leave us.
I'm okay with that, but now it's just going to be kind of weird, Like, it's one thing if you couldn't show up for, like, a production, but now it's just weird. Like, you're going to look on the screen, and if in 2 years we're still seeing Stan Lee cameos, or in 3 years we're still seeing Stan Lee cameos, then I'm just like, this just feels awkward. This is like if they tried to this is like in Star Wars when they just like basically hologrammed the old characters that had passed away to be in the new Star Wars movie, to be in the Solo movie.
Yeah.
Beyond all that, Stan Lee is a legend, one of the founders of Marvel Comics, one of the creators of all of your favorite fucking comic book characters, Spider-Man, the Hulk, just to name two. There are 9 million in a trillion thousand. And helped build comic books into what they are today as a whole. Did a little dirt, had some disputes along the way, but overall I think he definitely did more good than did ill out here.
I would definitely agree. He was a creator, but he was also an astute businessman. And yeah, you're gonna crack a few eggs to make that omelet. But he had a vision. He had a vision for since the 80s.
Yes.
Trying to bring the comic books that he kind of helped create. Shout out to Jack Kirby, who was really the brains behind a lot of Marvel's greatest
Don't
characters.
forget Steve Ditko.
Yes, indeed. Who brought, I believe, did Ditko bring the cosmic world to life, or was that Kirby as well? Was it Kirby that left for DC and started the whole the fourth world with Darkseid and Apocalypse or was that Ditko? And then he came back and made Thanos.
I'm gonna say it was Ditko, but I'm gonna double check it to make sure we don't get crushed.
Yo,
by the
get
listeners.
crushed by these. Yeah, for real. Just look up Thanos, well, interesting. Oh, okay, yeah. It might have been Jim Starling, but whoops. But there's an expansive. To clean it up. It's an expansive universe with an even more expansive publication history. But Stan Lee was definitely the champion of bringing it.
You're thinking of Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was the person that created the fourth world saga, which brought in the new gods in DC.
Okay, yeah. But he definitely came back and applied that, and that's where Thanos came from. But he's the one that brought it to life. On TV with that crazy Fantastic Four TV show that was a mess, but still better than the version that had Michael B. Jordan playing Human Torch.
Bro, you're skipping over like the old school Marvel cartoons. Like, remember when Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and like Stan Lee was the narrator?
I'm not talking.
And
really.
and then you go back with the old Fantastic Four cartoon.
I wasn't talking about the animated series. I was talking about the live action. He wanted to really bring it to life. And I'm not even bringing up really, DC did it as well with the Batman series first with Adam West. But we got really comic book geekish now. But a lot of people either don't know or don't realize that hip hop has an extensive relationship, a very in-depth relationship with comic book. A lot of pioneers, honestly, in rap were big comic book head, and quite frankly, hip hop or even just urban life was infatuated with
comic books in general.
Long before you saw it in the music and in the culture. DMC actually said, I was into comics before hip-hop even came over the bridge to touch me. And King of Rap, I didn't say, I'm DMC, I can rap. I say, I'm DMC, I can draw. You've got to think, when did hip-hop come? Hip-hop came in the early 70s. And at the same time, you had Bruce Lee, who was a motherfucking hero in comic books. And all of that existed for all of us who became those early and current hip-hop artists. It was a part of our lifestyle.
I mean, even when you go back to pioneers in a game like DJ Clark Kent, hint, and then Grandmaster Flash, like naming themselves after comic book characters, like there's always been a relationship between hip hop and comic books. Because if you think about it, a lot of the cats that were creating art back then, they would look for inspiration, and they would also like look for other ways to express themselves that weren't necessarily getting into trouble. So a lot of that, if you're not out there in the streets doing super street stuff, you looking into hobbies and doing different things. And a lot of that for people was reading comic books and getting lost into these stories, which were like burgeoning in the 70s and the 80s when comic books were in their quote unquote golden age, Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see like the correlation, especially in hip hop, which is so much about braggadocio and being larger than life. And you can see it. All these people that are just trying to like create these personas and taking inspiration from like these cartoon and comic book characters that are also larger than life and like patterning themselves after that,
Yeah, if we can talk a little bit more in detail about some of these artists who have adopted those personas. I think the most one of the more obvious ones besides Clark Kent would probably be Jean Grey as well.
MF Doom. MF Doom was always the first person that came to mind. Because it's just like and then went by Victor Vaughn.
Yeah.
Too when he was doing other stuff, other projects. Man, that's always like super apparent. Just other rappers, Big Pun.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody ever realized that Big Pun was a play on The Punisher.
Word, it's something that like somebody has to always like you get reminded of him. It's like, yeah, it makes sense. David Banner
Yep.
took his name from Bruce Banner, which, do you know the story behind that though?
I do not.
The reason why Bruce Banner wasn't called Bruce Banner in the old show where like that Lou Ferrigno be the Hulk.
Yeah.
They didn't call him Bruce Banner because the executives thought Bruce sounded too gay. So like that's why in this story his name is David Banner on the TV show. And that's where David Banner got the name from.
First of all, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Never knew that. Second, I forgot to mention it earlier, but yeah, the Hulk TV show was iconic, and I cannot remember any of the scenes when he was not the Hulk. Lou Ferrigno is the legend, you know, in that, and he's done he did a cameo in the Hulk movie that was starring Edward Norton.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Which I thought was a great movie.
They had to get Lou.
People are fucking haters, but I thought that was a great movie.
Yeah, the star of the show was fucking Bill Bixby.
Yeah.
Bill motherfucking Bixby.
Others, obviously, Ghostface Killer, aka Tony Starks, who was actually he did a cameo in the first Iron Man, or was it the second Iron Man?
Ghostface?
Oh no, his music video. Yes, it was the first one because. Damn, why am I forgetting everybody? Who's the one that be like, "Hey, man"?
Oh, Terrence Howard.
Terrence Howard was in it, and so they're on their private jet. This is before he was kidnapped. Yes, I didn't realize that method. I didn't know his nickname was Johnny Blades.
Word?
Yeah,
says that shit all the time. Johnny Blades ain't a damn thing changed. Yeah,
I didn't realize.
And in Triumph, he's like transform into the Ghost Rider, and he's also makes a cameo on Luke Cage. The super famous cameo on Luke Cage.
Yes, he does. But it was the scene itself was a little heavy-handed. Like, I get it. This is for black people. I get it.
It wasn't even it wasn't even this is for the black people. It was literally just like what I liked about it was like, oh shit, you're Luke Cage. It was like, oh shit, you're Method Man. And they were just geeked out about meeting each other. He was like, yo, can we switch hoodies? That's the part I was like, yo, Michael Coulter is like got like 60 pounds on you. Then again, apparently everybody in Wu-Tang is like 6'2".
Yeah,
and shit.
Michael
smack fire.
Mike Coulter is my height, maybe 6'1".
Yeah,
so he's not that big. You know, I think he just is in shows with smaller people. I'm pretty sure the dude that plays Daredevil and the dude that plays Iron Fist are like 5'6" niggas.
Well, yeah, but that's more believable. They can count.
I didn't also realize that Ja Rule's nickname was Loki, which would probably make 50 Cent Thor.
We don't acknowledge Ja Rule.
Since when?
I don't know. I don't acknowledge Ja Rule.
Ja Rule is a god of rap, and that's a fact.
That is not a fact.
Yes, he is.
That is not a thing.
Yo, if there
You know
was
what? You know what we're not
no
gonna do? What? If there was no Ja Rule, what?
There might not be a Drake. There might not be a Drake.
Yo. You know what we're gonna do?
Always there
this
when
is
you call.
This is a
later on time.
This is a later episode.
Is Ja Rule
because what we're not gonna do
is Ja Rule
what we're not gonna do is talk. What
we're not gonna do is allow any slander on it here.
Ja Rule made his money and had an impact on hip hop. What you won't do is call him a rap.
He's a rap god. He's a rap god. He's a rap god, and I'm not gonna deal with your disrespect.
Ja Rule's like, if you like minimize DMX and took away all his street cred, and you'd be left with Ja Rule.
Had hit after hit after hit after hit after hit, and then inspired 50 Cent to do love songs, and basically paved the way for a Drake, for a Kanye West. For a Kanye West and a Drake to make sing-song music.
Yo, Ja Rule ain't paved the way for nothing unless he had a construction job in his lean years.
Yeah. Get on this mic, please. Thank you. Yeah. Hold it down.
Ja Rule paved the way for simp rap.
Amen.
First off,
amen.
I don't know. I'm kind of triggered by the term simp rap, but we'll get past that. But no.
You know what I mean. Rappers
I know exactly what you mean.
Crooning on the track.
Rappers crooning to women. That's cool. But are we not remembering that like Nate Dogg was a thing?
No,
He
but-
wasn't singing for women,
Exactly.
but he
Exactly.
was still
It wasn't
singing
No,
on
sampled.
track.
no, but
It wasn't
Ja
sampled.
Rule was singing.
There's a whole
for women.
conversation about that, and
No,
I know
no,
you.
yeah, you out.
I know you, so it's not like I want to shoot you in the head. But like dudes that say alpha male and beta male feel like they should probably get shot in the head and dragged out and tortured. But that's just me. But that's a whole nother
That is
conversation.
you. That is you.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, let's get back.
Why are we talking about Ja
to this.
Rule? Let's talk about
Let's get back
comic
to this.
books. I'm not talking about Ja Rule right now. So yeah, but we're here to talk about comic books in hip hop and who you can see the effects of comic books in hip hop from hip hop's inception, presently, and it's definitely going to be even bigger in the future. Like recently, you had TDE executive produce the soundtrack to a hip hop movie in the form of Black Panther. You know, and that's something that like if you were to say that when the first X-Men movie came out, you'd be like, yo, that's kind of bugged out. You couldn't even see that. Wait, am I even misspeaking? Didn't RZA executive produce the Blade soundtrack? Or did I make that up? He definitely did.
He
Afro.
did Afro
He definitely
Samurai,
scored Afro
yeah.
Samurai. But even beyond that, man, it's like you have all these rappers that name themselves after the characters. You have the hip hop variants that Marvel started doing in 2015.
Which is, I have to salute Marvel for, because they didn't have to do that. They used the Run the Jewels logo for one of Black Panther's covers, variant covers.
Well, you know, so like low key, Run the Jewels is the origin for them doing a hip hop cover run. So originally in 2015, the director of Marvel at the time, Axel Alonso, his son was really into Run the Jewels. And Run the Jewels was doing a promotion called Tag the Jewels, where they were just getting people to do murals all over the place of like the Run the Jewels symbols. And so Axel was like, yo, let's do two covers. They did Howard the Duck and Rocket Raccoon number 2, and they did Deadpool number 45 in 2015. Those are the Run the Jewels covers. Marvel saw how well those covers did, then they started doing a series in 2015, and they had, what is it? Last thing I saw was maybe like 60 different hip hop covers where they were like reinterpreting famous covers of albums with like comic book characters. One of the smaller ones that people probably didn't notice, but I loved, was like they did a artist that was on Fool's Gold at the time when I was working there. His name was Hunnits. He had a CD cover, and they did it for Guardians of the Galaxy. They did it for Star-Lord. And it was super iced out, man. But I think all of this comes back to creativity, and then just creativity, storytelling, and finding happiness in a niche that other people don't find. Because like if you're in a hip hop, especially if you're creating hip hop, you're trying to find a creative outlet. You're trying to, in some ways, if you really care about lyrics, you're trying to tell a story. Even if you're not really in the lyrics, you're still trying to emote and express like a thought, a feeling, a story of some sort. And like if you're making the music, there are less people that make music than people that exist, and there are less people that find music important than people that even consume music, you know? So it makes sense that these two worlds would collide, because it's a bunch of outsiders trying to find meaning and spread whatever meaning and expression and emotion that they have. So that's why always this clear connection between hip hop and comics and Marvel and hip hop in particular, man. Like, I mean, the stories that they tell, because there's always a difference. Like, people say that you're a Marvel person, you're a DC person. And a lot of that comes from, like, the DC superheroes. A lot of them were, like, almost God. They were modeled after Greek gods. They had absolute powers to do everything. And they were created a little bit before, more mainstream, a little bit before the Marvel comics were. Marvel comics were a bit more grimier. Like, all their heroes had flaws. All their heroes were, like, messed up. Even Wolverine and Peter Parker are, like, their two biggest characters, and Wolverine is like a homicidal maniac that's barely on the edge of humanity, and that's his story, is just being like, how can I have my humanity while also like having this penchant for killing people? And Peter Parker is like, how can I survive with my moral code when everything against me is telling me to not have my morals, and I could be way more successful than I am right now, and I'm not, because of like the way I choose to live my life and the fact that I keep feeling like I have to help other people before I help myself. And so, like, that's why people gravitate to Marvel, and you can see it reverberating in hip hop as a culture.
That was really actually beautiful. That was actually pretty beautiful. But now that you bring up the difference between Marvel and DC, off the top of my head, I can't remember if DC has actually paid the same amount of attention to hip hop as Marvel. I think that Marvel has recognized, if only in their cinematic universe, has recognized the impact that hip hop has had in furthering a lot of their stories. But is there really? I just tried to Google it and I just can't see if DC actually cares.
So it depends on how you look at it, right? So when you look at Marvel, ostensibly they have been more into hip hop, but that's because like that leads to a couple different things. So like Warner Brother owns DC, whereas Marvel for the most part was self-contained up until it sold itself to Disney. So they had a bit more autonomy. But even then, people will feel like Marvel's connection to hip hop was debatable, because even when the covers came out, a lot of people were like, yo, it's cool that you're doing these hip hop covers, but how many of the artists you chose to do these are black? And in the first run of like 20 or so, 20, 30 covers, there was only one black artist. As time went on, they tried to change that, and they didn't have any black writers at the time either. So people were just like, yo, you're trying to profit off like the art that we make, but are you really making this art for us? And what you can see is that Marvel's characters, almost to their detriment, got more diverse recently, with like Miles Morales, with Riri, which became Iron Man. She became Iron Man for a while. Miss America, who's Latina and also gay. Miss Marvel, who's is
Muslim,
Muslim from Jersey City, and just like how they would try to herald their women, and then they Marvel has like a lot of gay characters. They had a gay wedding to be like on the front page. Sorry, on the cover.
Came out. Alternate.
So wait,
version of Iceman
don't get me started on Iceman. That's a whole nother subject, and I'm not on the right side of history with that one. But everything else,
I mean, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense.
He
cracks a lot of jokes. He's very personable.
No, because then you're gonna be like,
all of his relationships fall apart for lack of intimacy, not because he's a piece of shit like Logan.
Okay, here's my Iceman argument, and there's an old podcast of the old podcast that I used to do. Enough said. Shout to my homies. Wish we still did the podcast, but we don't. But anyway. There's an old podcast where I say the exact wrong thing, and I was on the wrong side of history. I've rethought it, and this is how I feel about it. I have no problem with there being characters specifically for marginalized communities. I have an issue when you retcon a character. When you retcon a character so much and try to rewrite their entire history, it's kind of like when cats are like, though Captain America was like, Hail Hydra, and people like flipped the fuck out, and it was on like the news. Like the Iceman thing, I was just like, why are you shoehorning this in now when it's never been canon? And then you could have just took the easy out and been like, all right, so Iceman that came from the past is like, nah, I'm gay. Iceman in the present is like, no, I'm not gay. And they had and it was like a long-standing thing where they were just talking about it. I guess that would also be kind of fucked up because they're supposed to be the same person. And if you're arguing that being a member of the LGBTQ community is not a choice, then one of them is lying to themselves. So I guess you can't really put that out there. But I just felt like it would lead to better tension if the older one that we've had for a while has been straight and the other one was gay. But I guess I can't really do that if I want to be on the right side of it. Fuck. Anyway. I just had an issue with it because I felt like they were going back and changing a long-standing history of a character that they didn't have to.
With all his failed relationships. And he looks as happy as he can be with the new Pyro. But
that's fine. Yo, that's fine. Like, then the other thing is, too, is just like, I realize that on certain levels with certain characters, I am too invested, so I get mad when they make small changes. So another example of this, and this is not even what we're talking about, fuck it. Nova was originally a white dude from like Staten Island or Long Island, right? And then they switched it and made Nova, they had a new Nova, they killed that dude, made a new Nova, and it was a Spanish dude, right? And a Spanish kid. And I should be like, yo, cool, diversity, we gotta win. But I was very invested in the original Nova, and the way they wrote him out was bullshit. And the way they wrote the new kid in, like, they put him on TV first, and on TV he was trash as shit. And then like he had his comic book, and I was just like, yo, I'm not accepting this new character when I've spent the last 3 years getting invested in this other character. So fuck y'all. But
Richard Rider's back, by the way.
yeah, he is.
Okay.
You're right. But like,
He's back.
I'm over it,
Okay, yes.
and I'm.
You
grown
sound
as
like a
human
you sound like a
being.
comic skate head right now.
Yo,
I'm just gonna say.
yo.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. You sound like a comic.
like Gamergate, motherfucker. Or some
You
shit
sound like a
that.
comic skate.
I'm just gonna say like,
Saying.
I've grown, and I know that now that I just need to get over it and understand that it's fiction. And if I
Don't sound like you got over it.
Huh?
Don't sound like you got over it.
I'm just saying, like, I can grow. I can grow as a person. And
Don't think you might have.
I can say like, yo, like, I kind of wish this direction didn't happen in the storytelling, but I'm not saying it as a referendum on these peoples and these marginalized communities that are being represented. It's not like, yo, I don't like gay people, that's why I don't like Gay Iceman. It's like, I've been very invested in this character for so long, and you're changing an integral part of him. It's okay, but I guess I'm just like, I was so used to the way my character was.
Well, because I don't know if you're okay. But I want to come back to a point because you said they have introduced a lot of characters, and my qualms with Marvel is that they didn't have a lot of actual people of color actually writing these characters. Miss Marvel is actually written by a Muslim woman, which I understand. The vast majority of these characters, the Riri, the Miles Morales, and even Jessica Jones, and some of her interactions with Luke Cage were created and written by Brian Michael Bendis. And I have issues with his storytelling already, but I also have an issue with, he said that, I have like these black daughters, so I want them to have these characters to represent them. And my thing is, well, yeah, create the characters, but also find writers to tell their stories, because you look at what they're saying and it's clear. It's almost it's very uncomfortable for me sometimes, because you have that you know that this white man that are writing these stories. So I think that Marvel might have dropped the ball on that as well. I still salute them because at least they have made an effort, where I don't see that effort being made by DC.
So DC, I feel like at one point DC tried, but it's just harder for them because they're steeped in so much more history for them to just change things, and they're also just like
Marvel and DC have been around for the same amount of time.
Yeah, but you got it.
If anything, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby made the decision to actually make comic books to reflect the times. If it was just a whole bunch of white folks with superpowers fighting against each other, they were still talking about what was going on in society.
That's what I mean though. So like the history and fuckery of like the Justice League is steeped in a lot of like white man shit. Whereas like Marvel out the gates, they were like, all right, we're making X-Men. X-Men are going to be a direct reflection of like the 60s and the struggle for civil rights, you know? Like they had all this shit in mind when they were like creating these characters, and that a lot of that wasn't happening when like the Flash and fucking Superman were being created back in the day.
There was one issue of Superman where Lois Lane, where she was changed to a black woman, and she saw the treatment that black women were receiving, because I forgot how she got changed, but yeah, she was changed into a black woman for the issue, and then throughout the whole issue, she was just dealing with overt racism, and then like after she changed back, she was just like, yo, what the fuck? Like, this is what y'all really going through. And like that was a really early comic book. So I wouldn't say DC like completely disregarded it, but yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I felt like in my interpretations that Marvel just usually did it better, or like kind of did it first. The thing that you were bringing up too was like, it's super interesting, because it's like, all right, is it a question of you're not allowed to write a character that's outside your purview, or is it there's such little representation in general in the industry that like if you are gonna really tell these stories right, you really need to do some influx of diversity. So if Marvel had like, if 30% of their staff were people of color and then they're telling these stories, it would look a bit different. And if a guy's just like, yo, I just want to create a character, I want the character to be this, Like it might be a little bit better for Brian Michael Bendis to create a character that's out his purview. And also when they're in these meetings discussing like this is what's gonna happen, somebody would be there to be like, yo, that's cool, but that's not how that would happen. And so maybe that would alter his writing a little bit. It's the whole idea behind like you need a diverse writer's room, otherwise things are gonna feel stilted and they're not gonna be correct, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I get exactly what you're saying. Like Wonder Woman can be written by a man. It doesn't necessarily have to be written by a woman. But when you're creating this, like, are you getting input from people that are actually from that community to make sure that, one, the story you're telling isn't fucked up, and two, when you're done telling your story, can you hand it off to somebody else that might be in the community? And that's an issue that some of these companies like find themselves in. Is just like they haven't done the work to find the talent, because the talent's there. There's a bunch of amazing black creators and writers out there. I mean, they even had fucking Reginald Hudlin that was head of BET writing for a while, and that's why we got Ta-Nehisi Coates writing that Black Panther run,
and now writing Captain America, and it's a really good vibe.
Yeah, and it's even like we just need these different voices to touch on these characters, because you never know what you get. Like when Kevin Smith wrote Daredevil, of course it's another white dude writing a white dude, but Kevin Smith has a completely different perspective from like the majority of like the comic book aficionado writers, and that's why he had him sitting in a community meeting, just talking about like, that's what I'm trying to do, and it just hits you with a different perspective. And I think that's the whole point of comic books, man. Like at this point, comic books have evolved to such a medium, fuck you Bill Maher, that they can tell so many different stories and tell it in-depthly and tell it passionately, tell it from so many different angles that, like, of course it's going to be appealing. It's going to be super appealing to like artists. Because what the fuck do we call rap artists? We call them artists, right? Artists consume art and they make art. Comic books are a part of art, and it's an art that's super accessible. Like, you can go buy a comic book a lot of different places, and it's not in a Met, it's not in a Guggenheim. You can access it. Yeah.
Yep. I do also want to say fuck you, Bill Maher. I think the idea
out here taking shots at Stan Lee after he passed away. Where the fuck was you when he was alive to fire back at your dumb ass? Sorry.
I will say that the very fact that you had a cameo in Iron Man 3 kind of makes you a hypocrite. I think it's ridiculous that you would speak out for people appreciating Marvel and comic book movies when you're a stand-up comedian that is potentially regarded for your socio-political commentary. So yeah, it's a big fuck you to that. I kind of want to close out with again saluting Stan Lee for his impact, not only in our lives, but for the culture of hip hop and really for the world.
Can I shout out two things before we wrap up?
Yeah.
All right. Number one, I want to shout out Ed Piskor. Ed Piskor is the dude that did Hip Hop Family Tree, which is a comic book retelling of the origins of hip hop. And he's also doing X-Men Grand Design, which is a retelling of the history of the X-Men. And the second thing is that UMG is doing a cover reissue for 3 hip hop albums starting in December. They're going to reissue Get Rich or Die Trying, Liquid Swords, and Mama Said Knock You Out with their Marvel hip hop variant covers. And that's going to happen in December. So that's going to be fucking flames. So just want to shout that out. So hip hop, comics, all coming together. Shout out to DMC because he put out his own comic book. And shout out to Nicki Minaj who also had her own comic book.
Okay, all right. Look. All right. And I do want to shout out Kwanzaa and TS3 for their comic book Black, which is a title of what if only black people could have superpowers, and how they essentially the government works to kill them, and the organization of black superheroes tries to keep them under wraps. So there is no black genocide. It's very fascinating. Yes, maybe it's fiction. Maybe it's fiction. But I do want to read this quote before we close out. It was written by Lee in 1968, right after Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Racism and bigotry are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. But unlike a team of costumed supervillains, they can't be halted with a punch in the snoot or a zap from a ray gun. This motherfucker was really old.
This was the 60s too.
Yeah. The only way to destroy them is to expose them, to reveal them for the insidious evil they really are. Rest in peace to Stan Lee, the God, the other God besides Ja Rule.
Y'all not gonna get me started on this shit, yo.
And
That nigga's always on time for his court appearances. How about that?
to wrap up, thank you so much for your time. We would enjoy and encourage you to offer your own opinions on our social media. You can find us at Twitter and Instagram at HKL Podcasts. Definitely check out some of Classic Material's newest wares on classicmaterialny.com. And as always, we know y'all gotta live this hard knock life, but we hope y'all make it look easy. Until next time.
Peace.